are you going to speak? Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission on June 22nd, 2009. Our agenda was posted on or before Tuesday, June 16th, 2009 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Adrian, Commissioner Mardian,
Here.
Commissioner Amirian,
Here.
Commissioner Stepanian,
Here.
and Chair Landrigan.
Here. And we have 2 minutes for us to discuss and or approve. We'll start with March 23rd, 2009.
Madam Chair, I believe that was continued. I'm ready to make the motion to approve those.
All right. Do I have a second?
I believe that was the minutes that I was not present.
You were not here.
So I cannot second that.
So, Ms. Stepanian, thank you so much. So, all in favor of passing them as is? Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Are you going to vote on it, Mr.?
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Motion to approve passes. How about for Monday, April 27th? I was absent, so I wasn't able to discuss whether this was correct or not.
I looked at it. I didn't find any issues with that. I'm ready to make a motion.
All right.
If other commissioners don't have anything.
Madam Chair, with the exception, I think, on the title, when the meeting starts, Americana. Mr. Americana, it should be Mr. Amirian.
American.
Oh, I should
American, actually, it's American.
American, all right.
I should have comment on that.
You should have caught that one.
So,
Actually, it doesn't feel bad, Mr. American.
no, it doesn't. So with that change, Mr. American has made. Do I have a second, Mr. Marty?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain. Thank you. Motion passes to approve the minutes. We're moving on to oral communications. This is the portion of our agenda where if you have an item to speak on, you may bring it up now, and you're limited to 5 minutes. Do we have any speakers? Seeing none, we will move on to old business. Mr. Platt, do we have any old business?
We have no old business.
Well, we're just whipping through this agenda. For number 6, now we'll move on to our new business, which is item A, 1344 Rosmoyne Avenue, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract application. Mr. Platt.
Great. Today's nomination is a beautiful Tudor Revival style house in the Rosmoyne neighborhood. You can see it on the map here. You can see it specifically at the intersection where Hillcroft Road kind of meets Rosmoyne, which continues kind of winding down the hill to the right. You may have noticed when you were looking at the house, which hopefully you had a chance to drive by, that it's for sale. And the owner of the house is specifically choosing to nominate it and to apply for the Mills Act so that future owners will be, receive the Mills Act benefit, but also receive the responsibilities of the Mills Act. Philip Reynolds and his wife Liz have lived in the house for quite some time. They really love it, and they really wanted to protect it. I left for you a statement from Mr. Reynolds, which we can either read into the record later, or you can just read at your leisure, indicating that they couldn't be here today because they had travel plans, but they didn't want to delay the process so that they can have this resolved before any buyers go into escrow. So looking at the house, it was built in 1931. We don't know who the architect was. I think it's an interesting contrast if you think back a couple of months to the Tudor Revival house on Ardevine we looked at that was designed by one of our most notable architects, Alfred Priest, but was a very simple kind of version of the style. This house really has a lot of the bells and whistles associated with it, the half timbering up in that upper bay, the extensive use of brick, the dominant and decorative chimneys, the kind of overall tall facade proportions and steeply pitched roof. Here's a great view that the Reynolds had from 1984 before the trees grew in, so that we can see this kind of the north end of the house a little bit better. And then I really was particularly struck by that recessed doorway with the simple brick arch and the little bench seats next to the door, and a very simple detail, but a lovely one. If you look carefully over on the left side of the top picture, there's a little piece of wood that's jutting out from the side here. It turns out that that was part of a patio cover addition that the Reynolds put in a number of years ago. When I visited the site, I said, it's not ideal to have this kind of modern element jutting out here, but I'm not sure the commissioners will care, so we can wait and see what they say. Mr. Reynolds went ahead and just chopped that off so that there's no longer this piece of wood jutting off onto the side. So he didn't want to have anything tie up the nomination process. Here's on the south side of the house is this wonderful porte cochere with a full height roof on the top of it with a dovecote. This leads to a back garage area that you can see in the lower picture and kind of a motor court. One of the details that I was struck by on this house, the upper picture shows some windows on the front facade with these very simple turned wood elements, the mullions and the jambs. And if you look at these square columns in the porte cochere, it has the same detail. It's just transferred to a square column from these round columns or round mullions. So it's that kind of level of detail of the architecture that really strikes me when we have these non-architect, or we don't know who the architect was, but you still see really exquisite design and use of materials. Both of these chimneys have been rebuilt at different periods due to earthquake damage, and I think you can see that they've taken great care to kind of replicate details of Tudor Revival type chimneys with the kind of panel detail in the center of each, these wrought iron tiebacks, and then of course the clay chimney pots at the top. Here's a view of the side facade from the motor court. In general, every window in the house appears to be original with the exception of this lower area on the porte cochere. This was actually a kitchen bump out. A small square footage was pushed forward toward the driveway, and then this bay window was installed. All of that work, that was in keeping with the style of the house and really isn't too noticeable from the street. And then we have this simple but wonderful garage, wonderful because it seems to be almost completely original. These doors are very early. This kind of presages our conversation about garage doors in a little bit. And then you have this wonderful steeply pitched roof that still has wood shingles on it. The house was built by Harvey Nelson, who was a realtor, and his wife, Marianne, was the daughter of a well-known Nebraska congressman. And I think it's interesting, the house was built in 1931. We didn't have a lot of construction going on during 1931. And so the question, which is still unanswered, but we can speculate, a 40-year congressman from Nebraska may have had a considerable amount of money that he could give to his daughter to help build a house at this time. And then Tim Gregory's report also says that he was a Hollywood real estate broker, but it doesn't explain exactly what that means. But if he was working with, Hollywood-type people, that industry, of course, was thriving during this time, so there may have been plenty of money for the family. They didn't live in it for a long time, and they themselves aren't significant, so this house has been nominated just for its architecture. One of the things that I think you read about in the report that you need to consider today is the backyard condition. So these photos show the pool and the decking that the Phillipses built in the 1970s, I believe. This upper balcony on the second floor is original, but then this kind of shade structure and the pool and the deck were added. A lot of it is more or less built up on the very, very steep site, so there's a big drop-off once you get to the end of this deck. Here you can see the house from Mountain Street, and so the back of it is fairly visible, and you can see how steeply the backyard really does drop off. The Phillipses have chosen not to include the backyard in the designation or in the nomination. The reason, I'm sorry, I included it in your staff report but forgot to put it in this, but if you leaf through the staff report, you can see that this was originally built on two lots 25 and 26. There was a later lot line adjustment that was made when the Phillipses built their pool so that the pool would stand solely on the upper lot that belongs to the house, and then these terraced gardens would be part of the second lot. This lot has access from the lower portion of Ross Moyne that kind of curves down toward Mountain, and the Phillipses chose to keep this out of the nomination specifically because it's potentially a developable site. They didn't want to it doesn't seem likely that this would be developed. If you had a chance to look at it, it's very steep and has very limited access to the street, but I think technically it could be. So that would need to be part of your decision-making if you think that the house itself and the land it's on is significant enough to be designated without this portion of the lot. And as I mentioned, the house meets both parts of criterion D, the architecture criterion. It's really one of the best tutors in the neighborhood from everything that I've seen through that area. And just looking at it individually, you can see it really has a lot of the details and design features that we associate with the style, and it's a very good version of it. And that is everything. If you wanted me to read anything into the record from Mr. Reynolds' letter, I could do that, or you can move forward.
Well, I think the letter's very nice. Commissioners?
There's no need. It can be part of it, but do we need to read it? There's no need for
No,
that.
no, it's
I
not
don't think
necessary.
so.
It's in the public record already. So.
Madam Chair, may I ask some questions?
Sure, please.
The lot line adjustment, now, I was a little confused. Clarify, please. They started in 1968 and in 1969, and they did some other adjustment in 1981.
Yeah, the 1981 adjustment, in 1968, it was divided into Parcel A and Parcel B instead of Lot 25 and Lot 26.
Okay.
And I believe there was an adjustment to the line at that point. When the Phillipses built their pool and deck, it extended over onto Lot B, the lower part of the slope. So they wanted to make the adjustment so that the lot line wouldn't encumber any of their the improvements they made.
And now
And
that,
at that time, there was also a pool house I haven't seen pictures of. I don't know if it was a pool house or kind of an outbuilding in a barbecue area that was demolished as part of the
Yeah,
city's
right.
requirements for the lot line change. So.
no, so these retaining walls that you show, they fall where on the,
These are on the lower part of the slope in Lot B, the part that isn't being nominated. Lot A,
deck and
there's...
the pool is part of the nomination?
Yeah, the pool, if you can see in this photo, the deck area here is part of the nomination. And if
So
you
where's the
drew-
property line?
If you drew a line straight down from the deck, there's a little kind of flat lawn area
Right.
here. 4 feet downhill from there is where the lot line
What
is.
the lot line is, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the Reynolds had it very clearly staked out, so it was they wanted me and you and everyone to see like where the lot line was, so you would be comfortable.
Yeah, the reason I'm concerned, because maybe these retaining walls are part of the deck or not, I'm not sure, so.
No, these
These
aren't
are-
part of the structural
Right,
system
okay.
for the deck. Their age makes them appear to probably be from the time of construction of the house. They're probably an original feature, or at least parts of them, and maybe they were added onto over the years. It's a really extensive network of walkways, stairways,
Yeah, I see
ramps,
that.
and
Yeah.
it's really
All these
it's really
walkways.
lovely, and the Reynolds are great gardeners, so it's very nice.
My last question, actually two questions. Where's that 3-foot addition that was done years ago?
The 3-foot
I couldn't tell, it was done so
addition is
well.
on
Is
the
that the kitchen
kitchen,
one
yeah.
we're talking about?
Yeah, the south side, it said.
On the south side, it's this area right here was originally, I don't even know if it was 3 feet, maybe it was, but it was pushed back.
That's what the report
They
says.
brought it forward to be flush with this wall, expanded their kitchen, and then brought the roof. There was, I imagine, a shorter roof here originally, and they brought that out to cover the addition.
My last question, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. On the Tim Gregory's report stated that there were pair of windows were replaced to steel windows.
Yeah,
I
there's
couldn't tell where they were.
that I'm a little uncertain about. This window up here is a stained glass window that's set in a steel window. I'm not sure if Tim had the permit history for that, I can't remember, or if he was just kind of judging it to be different because it
I
wasn't
think it
a
was
wood window.
Part of the history of the
There
permits.
are 2 leaded glass windows on other parts of the house. I can't remember if we have photos of those. There's a leaded glass window in this bay on the north end of the house, and then I believe this stairwell window, this tall window here, is leaded glass with just clear glass. Doesn't have stained glass. Both of those look like they're original. And I'm not sure what the second steel window would be, but maybe it's a similar situation to this stained glass window here.
All right. Thank you very much.
There were also, it's possible there's a game room that's underneath the garage that's kind of downslope from the house. That pretty much was in its original condition when I looked at it, but that might be a place where there could have been a steel window inserted, because I think there were some additions, a bathroom was added or altered down there.
Mr.
I have a
Amirian?
question, yeah. Do you know what is the width of the lot B? Approximately.
Don't know.
I think it was about 42, 45.
Yeah, it could be between 40 and 50. Want to see if we have it on any of the documents in here. It has a fairly narrow street frontage.
Very narrow.
And then I think the lot expands a little bit beyond the street frontage.
Which means
You had the map
that
there.
if somebody wants to build this,
Yeah, I didn't have them.
5 feet setback from each side, and you will have only a 30 feet wide to build your structure.
Yeah, without the original appeal, before the Reynolds owned the house, the original request for the lot line adjustment was denied, and then it went to the BZM, and the denial was overruled, and so it was granted. But in that discussion, there was some concern that it wasn't going to be a buildable lot. But when the decision was overturned, I assume they felt that there was enough there that they could work with it. It might need variances. And to be honest, looking at it, it's not a lot that jumps out at you as like, oh, this is a great
Prime,
developable lot. In terms of the character of the house, it's so steep that pretty much anything that were built there wouldn't really have a visual impact. You could build a 2-3-story house almost on parts of that you wouldn't interfere with the house, and plus everything would be of the backside of the house anyways.
Mr. Amirian, I'm looking at one of the exhibits included in here. It shows a measurement approximately 45 feet from the property line to the deck before the lot line adjustment. So
Yes.
that parcel B is probably about 40 feet wide.
Which is very narrow
Very narrow.
for a building in that area of town. Okay.
Madam Chair, he raises an interesting point because the rules have changed since then. It's not 5-foot setback for a new house.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
Oh, and then the hillside,
Yeah, so it's going to be even,
more dire.
they have conditional
Be a
use.
shotgun haul. Mr. Panian, you have any comments?
Well, I just went by and I really like the house and you can't even notice all the alteration they've done through the years, and it's in a immaculate shape, and I really like the house. I will recommend it just be approved.
Thank you. I drove by the house, and I think it's really quite nicely restored. And the walls of the little retaining walls are really enchanting, really enchanting space.
Yeah.
And I think that it certainly merits preservation. I think it's nice that the owners are trying to protect it so that it becomes part of the purchase, you're purchasing into this protection. I think that's a lovely thought. So,
Are we in the comment period?
yes, I'm going to open it up for comments.
When you're finished,
I'm done?
My comment. Yeah, unfortunately I could not go on Wednesday and Thursday to go all around the building, so I saw it from the curbside. I think it's a very, very beautiful building. And one thing that struck me was the owners are going to sell the building and leave, and they are asking that to be nominated for historic resource. I think that tells a lot about the owners, the quality of their taste and their kind of commitment to good buildings. I admire that. The building itself is wonderful, and I will have no hesitation, and I'll be honored to recommend that for council consideration when times come back. And I like to make it correct. If you give me that sentence now, I will read it exactly from that.
Well, we have it. Does someone have the staff report to share?
I don't have one.
No, we didn't print it out.
we're saving trees.
paper.
I will put words in your mouth.
I have murdered that several times, so.
Oh,
So if you
Yes.
take this section
Yeah.
and change staff.
Oh,
Thank you.
Ms. Stefanian had it.
Oh, you have it. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we are not done yet, so.
No, we aren't.
Yeah, okay.
So, Ms. Stefanian, do you have some more comments?
Well, I just really like the house, it's just that the setting of the house, it was so private and so nice, and I just really fell in love. I never drove that side of the Rosemont, and I just followed the numbers to get to the house, and the placement of the house, it was really amazing. And I really like the house, and I wouldn't be hesitant to purchase the house if I had the money. But that's a beautiful house, and I don't have any hesitation. And I would recommend again to council to consider to be a historical.
Thank you. Mr. Marty?
I just concur with my colleagues. I think this is an outstanding home. This is one of the the best examples in the Tudor style. And the whole street, I think, should be one day
Historic.
historic because it has
Yeah.
it relates to,
There's talk of it.
yeah, there's
It's really pretty.
Can I ask one more question, Madam Chair? Now, was this area surveyed years ago?
No, it's not part of the surveys we have.
We've not surveyed it, okay. And the last question I had was the chimney, those clay chimney caps. Now, are these both recent? You see, there's a difference between two of them.
Yes, the two on the left look round,
And the
the
other
two on
ones
the
look
right look
different.
kind of
Square,
oblong
kind
or
of,
squarish. Or,
The reason I mentioned those are, for the period home, that's fine with me.
well,
These are good.
when we discuss chimney caps in a few minutes, these might not meet code right now.
Okay, all right.
Someone wanted to do it new, so.
Well, I do agree again with my colleagues. This is a wonderful house, and we should preserve it. And I appreciate that the Reynolds coming forward, and I'm ready to make a motion whenever it's time.
Well, I'll just wrap by saying I totally agree with my colleagues here. I think this is a stunning Tudor house. It's been lovingly restored, and I really commend the Reynolds for making this legacy part of the purchase price. I think it says a lot for their love of the property and their love of Glendale and the history, and I just think that's very admirable. I agree 100%. So I am happy to entertain a motion.
Okay, I move that Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that the property at 1344 Ross Moyne Avenue, Lot A of parcel map such and such, be a designated historic resource in Glendale Register of Historic Resources based on findings identified in the staff determination. Now,
And continue to the Mills Act.
and also suggest that the Historic Preservation Commission recommends that the City Council authorize the City Manager to enter into Mills Act contract with the property owners for the property tax savings. Okay?
Fabulous. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion, but I also want to compliment Mr. Jay for putting this report. This is one of the most complete reports I've
Very
seen.
good. Very
When I
good.
saw the pages, I said, what am I going to read?
But that is not part of the motion.
That's not part of it.
You can make it so if you'd like.
I wouldn't.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And so, roll call, please.
Commissioner Mardian,
Yes.
Commissioner Amirian.
Yes.
Commissioner Stepanian.
Yes.
Chair Landrigan.
Yes. Congratulations, thank you.
All right, wonderful.
Very nice. Now we have Planning Department updates and informational briefings. Staff presentation and commission discussion regarding historically appropriate replacement garage doors and chimney caps.
So
Is that going to be you, Mr. Platt?
that's going to be me.
Excellent.
Today, I'll let the pictures do the talking because this is more your discussion to give staff guidance as we move forward with issues where we're looking at houses that you're considering for designation. In a couple of cases that I'll show you here, you haven't been happy with certain features, even though you're overall happy with the homes themselves. If you remember this house in Chevy Chase Canyon, this is 2964 Edmonton Road, and it's a lovely Spanish house with a great setting in the oak trees and little creek. But when you considered the designation, you were really concerned about this rebuilt chimney, and particularly about this big old spark arrestor up on top of the chimney. At the time, we hadn't really encountered this issue, and you asked me to work with the applicant to see if we had any solutions that we could get rid of this and put something up that was more historically appropriate for a Spanish Revival house. It turned out that he had warranty issues. This was part of a single metal flue system that it was attached. He would void his warranty if he were going to remove this, and they were obviously not interested in doing that. So we came up with a solution to kind of an experimental solution to paint the chimney cap with a a high heat paint. It's kind of a dark red color that's theoretically blending in with the Spanish tile roof. And to my mind, to my eye particularly, it's not an incredibly successful solution, and I'm not sure that any of you thought it was. So that kind of planted the seed that maybe we need to kind of consider what our options are when people come to us with properties where the chimney caps particularly might not be appropriate. I spoke with our fire safety team here, and they referred me to the code section that discusses what we actually have to have on top of any new work that's done on a chimney. So this would apply to any new construction chimney or to any work that was done on an existing chimney. And the requirements are pretty simple, but they don't leave a lot of design options, but we'll look at a bunch that may work. Anytime a solid fuel, such as wood, is part of the fireplace system, you have to have a spark arrestor. No question about it, whether you're in the flat parts of Glendale or up in the hillside areas. The area of the arrestor, and I'll show you some pictures, but it would be the area that the smoke can actually come out of, has to be 4 times the area of the actual chimney outlet. So if you had a clay flue that had, say, 23 square inches of open area, you'd have to have 92 square inches of open area on your spark arrestor. There's also requirements for usually a spark arrestor is made up of metal mesh, so the openings in the mesh have to have a certain diameter, and it's done by what size steel ball could you place or not place through the mesh, which accounts for the fact that they're not perfect squares. They're usually diamond-shaped because of the mesh. So that's clearly defined. That won't have much of an aesthetic impact, what size mesh is up there, if we can approve arrestors that we think are acceptable. And then finally, this arrestor has to be accessible and removable, which every one that we're going to look at today is, and that's specifically so that chimneys can be cleaned, so the flue is accessible. So here's some of the things that are out on the market, and basically I just did some internet research to find pictures of what's out there that we can realistically expect homeowners to consider. This is something that you just clamp right on top of an existing chimney pot. I don't think any of us want to see this as the dominant exterior spark arrestor that we're going to look at. But
why do we eliminate that? Maybe one of us might want that.
It's quite. You're right. I can't speak for you. I want to hear from you. I'm just presenting information.
Go for each cage if I turn it up.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
But if I was going to editorialize on something, this is probably a good one to do it on. So.
Okay.
This is the kind of arrestor that covers multiple flues. And in most of our houses, a lot of our chimneys are on 2-story houses where you have at least 2 flues and sometimes even more that share one chimney. And this is starting to become something that might be more aesthetically pleasing or compatible with some of our historic house styles. Basically, these would be attached to the top of the chimney, and then the existing chimney caps would be underneath inside the box, basically. It's like a cage you put around them. And then if this were aesthetically acceptable to the commission, we would just then have to make sure that the square inches or footage of the mesh openings is going to meet code. Here's one installed, and I can say, this may or may not be appropriate for certain styles, but it does have the benefit of being a fairly simple appearing device. One thing that we can do if we were compelled, and typically in a historic chimney, we're going to have a clay-lined flue and usually some sort of clay chimney pot. In rebuilt or more modern installations or even rehabbed installations, there might be a metal flue liner where we're kind of stuck with one of those metal spark arresters similar to this one on Edmonton. In this case, there are these devices called chimney shrouds, which basically are just like superficial little coverings that you can put over and around these spark arresters and just try to disguise them. And I was surprised to find how many different varieties of these things there are. There's not necessarily one for every style that we have, but it was promising that this might be a solution. Again, here the question is you can't interfere with the open area of the smoke being released from the chimney, so there'd have to be a calculation to make sure it was legal and approvable. But you go from some pretty basic shapes to like the one on the right, where I don't think we have too many Moorish Arabian fantasy houses that this would work for, but you never know what's going to work. So I think the good thing about this exercise is learning that there are a bunch of options, some more fanciful than others, that we can consider and recommend to applicants when they come to us. For Tudor houses specifically, it was interesting to find that there are some of these kind of copper flue or chimney pots that actually have spark arresters built into them. I wasn't able to do enough research to determine if, I don't know if the top of these has mesh on it also. Usually they want to have the top covered to keep rain from entering. So to my eye, this looks like it might not really be enough space with the mesh to meet our code. But it's something we could certainly explore with applicants if they really have a very elaborate style chimney that we want to kind of keep that look. There are also a few others, like these two on the right, that come closer possibly to meeting code. I'm not sure how many houses we have that this will actually be a solution for, but it's good to know that we have, a fair variety of these things that we didn't know about when we were working with the house on Edmonton. That said, the house on Edmonton, the arrestor had such a big diameter that I don't know that any of these would work with that. So hopefully we're going to be catching these before as people apply to us to do the work so we can work with them rather than kind of inheriting a condition that's hard to solve. Yes, ma'am.
So, on that kind of wavelength, when a person applies for a permit to rebuild their fireplace, do they come in for a permit? If it's in a historical district, is there a way for us to mark that and say, really this needs to meet also the aesthetic intent too?
Yeah, that's the whole wonderful thing about districts and also all our register properties. They're flagged in our permit tracking system so that permits can't be issued until they get preservation sign-off. So if someone comes to the counter, hopefully I'm going to be working with them as early in the process as possible, but even if not, it's flagged, so we'd end up working with them. And now that we know some of these options, we can work with them. And I think the worst case is going to be when someone needs to rebuild a chimney, and you have a choice now of doing a masonry chimney in the more traditional style or kind of a boxed-out chimney with stucco cladding. I don't see any reason why a boxed-out stucco-clad chimney couldn't look good. They don't always, but it's possible to make them look good. And in that case where we have metal flue liners, we're going to get these kinds of different types of arresters up at the top. But I think that's where we can work with them to specify the shape and size of those, maybe even the shape and size of the chimney itself, so that we can put something on it that's going to kind of disguise that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
I'm glad you mentioned that actually the cap on Edmonton extended over, so they'll have to, if they come to us, we'll have to, is it in our authority to tell them we need to put a cap? Like the example you showed in here kind of goes out from, that could have been a solution.
I think it's in the Commission's authority to say, we love your house, we want to see it designated, but we cannot abide by the chimney. And someone could choose to rebuild a chimney or really do some more extensive work on it if it meant enough to them. I think for us, we'd have to determine really, is the chimney feature so visible and so horrible that we can't really bear looking at it? Or is it something we could live with? And then under the Mills Act, assuming that goes on for many years, if repairs had to be made, we would then be covered in terms of making sure there was staff approval for something better.
Yeah, I mean, anything we can do to, maintain the character of the house. The reason I asked for this to be on the agenda, because I briefly looked at our guidelines, the historical district guidelines. Chimneys are defining feature of the home, in addition to doors and other character defining features. And because the reason I also question, because most of these new installations are like Edmonton right here.
Exactly.
So it's not really, we can come back and say, okay, we're going to put a mesh on this. That's, covers that, which is fine. But most of them are going to be in a prefabricated.
And proportion is not something they think about.
Right. We will, hopefully. One of the good things I learned during this research is that in recent years, there's some new techniques for improving the seismic stability as well as the kind of smoke tightness of chimney flues. In the past, you used to have to run another liner inside the existing liner, which led to kind of smaller diameters. Now there's this kind of a spray-on technology, almost like gunite for a pool, that you drop this down and you can spray the interior of the lining, which won't have any impact on the exterior, which means that we'll maintain kind of a masonry flue and chimney pot, and then some of these other options would work for that. They wouldn't have to put this kind of arrestor on it. This is really only when you have a metal chimney flue that you have to.
Right.
And I'm not even 100% sure you have to have this kind, but this is the kind you typically have on those metal flues.
Well, even the sheet metal detailing on the top of that is.
Yeah, this chimney is not a great example for us in other ways also.
Well, that's what I was trying to avoid, to have these chimneys part of the home. It'll just step up the bar a little bit.
Sure.
Yes, Mr.
I'm not sure really what are we trying to do here. We cannot, I believe, decide on a type or a second type or a third alternative and say these are the ones that we are going to use. I suspect each building will be different from the other one, and each applicant will be different from the previous one. One applicant might say, this is what I have, and I'm not going to change my chimney, it is costly, and you consider the building as is. So I think we should kind of have this as reference material, and on case-by-case basis, work with the applicants to see whether they are willing to do one of these or maybe a different one, rather than establish a policy and saying.
Yeah, I think the goal today was to just show that we have some solutions that might work on a case-by-case basis with the kind of period revival and the older traditional style homes that we have. I think one thing to remember is that we will always be treating, Glendale Register properties, especially with Mills Act contracts, a bit differently than historic district properties. So there could be kind of a differential level of review with, higher expectations for a Mills Act property than we would have necessarily in a historic district. But in a district, our review will always make sure that the new work is appropriate for the district and for the house. So.
Now, shall we kind of keep this as reference material?
Yeah, I could print out color copy. I just did that to save.
And also, I
ink.
believe you had asked us to kind of chip in and bring some more if we see. I think we should do that. I haven't done that kind of a homework, but I will. There are certain booklets that have very beautiful chimney caps. So if we kind of.
Yeah, based on this, I have a new folder for chimney caps and a new folder for garage doors, and so we'll, build on that. And then when we sit down with applicants, we can show them a picture book. Here are a bunch of examples. Do you like any of these? Do they work for you? And we'll see.
Okay.
Actually, like Mr. Jay said, that they're all available. They're all online.
Yes.
All these doors, and for the purpose of conversation, we're talking about chimneys, and the reason I also wrote this up, I don't want to be cookie cutter. Pick this one, because most of these homes that we're going to see are Spanish. 70% of our, so these might not work, or they have to do a little more work to it. But I don't want to burden the applicant. I agree with Mr. Amirian that we should take it case-by-case basis. And the whole point behind this was not to have images like this, some cover around it. Now, how they achieve it, is, I think, on the applicant. You know, we just have to say we need some sort of a, you know, a cap on it so we don't see that.
Yes,
I think that was the whole intent of the,
The trick will be to get caps that aren't more distracting
Right.
than the bad chimney pot itself. So.
okay.
Mr. Platt, one more question. This solves a resource problem for people who already have applied for consideration to be a historic resource or are part of a historic district. But there are individuals out there who may come in who are seeking to do changes to their property that have not reached that designation or are seeking that designation. And it would be part of the aesthetic element. So can we make this bit of information just available to whoever does plan checking as a resource to make recommendations so that people who are out there and any of the installers will realize that they have options to make aesthetic choices as well as functional?
Yeah, I'll make sure the senior urban designer has this. Alan Loomis will have a copy. We're all part of the urban design studio working with the current planning staff as they process applications.
Would you, though, approve a redone chimney? Would that be under your purview? I think it's maybe too small.
Well, we review all sorts of projects, very small projects sometimes, and the baseline is, does the proposed work change the architectural, potentially change the architectural style of the house? What we're usually trying to do is see if we can work with applicants to exempt them from going to the design review board. If someone had a beautiful chimney and they said they wanted to take it down and they said, I have no money, I have no interest, I cannot rebuild it, we might, in that case, just say, well, we can't approve this and we have to send you to DRB.
Okay. All right.
Generally, I'm an architect, and I can tell you from experience, chimneys are the last things that we design. It just happens at the end. There's just a line and a circle at the top. But I really think that we should go that and follow that process and advise the applicants and work on. Okay.
All right.
I had one more question. How does design review board treat chimneys? I'm just asking that as a general question.
Ian, Alan
They
might
get
want to
to-
help with that.
Well, one example of that, not only chimneys, but generally, how do they deal with the buildings? As you go up Pacific Avenue, on the northwest corner of Pacific and Kenneth, you will see a building. That is the way we deal with our buildings.
It's certainly
Wow.
been in
I didn't mean
for
it
a
all,
while,
Kyle.
hasn't it?
Very well-known building.
I think I know which one you're talking
I
about.
notice
The
it
reason
every
I'm,
time.
you know, I've been designing homes for years. I do get into chimneys, you know, yeah, it comes in later, like Mr. Amirian said, but again, I've dealt with cities, you know, they want a chimney cap treatment, you know. I've had cases years ago where a previous design review board here on a multifamily required me to put a cap around the chimneys. So I mean, it's just for discussion. I'm bringing it out so I can, you know, because these things are going to overlap with each other eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the design review board has a pretty stringent set of expectations about the quality of craftsmanship and detail on buildings that they review. They will typically ask for this kind of level of information or condition it as part of the approvals that be done. So there'll certainly be a lot of crossover of this information over to projects being reviewed by design review.
I just don't want to be the people, you know, this commission being, oh, we're picking on chimney caps now, but it's just for designated and.
If any commission should look
You
at
know.
that carefully.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
our
you.
job.
All right.
And now are we going to move on to garage doors?
And this photo gives us our segue from the problematic chimney cap to a wonderful example of original garage doors still in
Oh,
place.
that's in Edmonton.
Yeah,
This is Edmonton again, right?
it has one that doesn't.
Now, here's one of the houses. We've had two Glendale Register nomination properties recently that raised questions for you about garage doors that led to this discussion. This is up at 955 Rosemount. This was the house designed by Milton Black, who also did a lot of the streamlined modern apartment buildings, pretty interesting architect. You love the house, you like the house, but you did not love or like the garage doors as they were painted. Your issue with these was not so much the doors themselves, but the fact that they just really jumped out. And you did request that the owner work with me to come up with a color that would work, and then that was actually applied to the doors before this was approved at City Council. So City Council saw the new doors for their approval.
Oh, look,
Forgive
much
the
better.
color difference here. This is a bad scan up on the left in the lower picture, but this brown color is really the more close to the actual color. So they chose a slightly darker shade for the doors, which was what you had recommended. And I think it was a successful solution because these doors, even though these are metal doors, they could be wood doors from the street. It's very hard to tell
vertical.
the difference. For me, this one served as kind of a role model as we consider garage doors, that simple doors for replacements may be the way to go rather than elaborate doors. But I wanted to show you a bunch of the examples. And again, I just pulled a bunch of things off the web. Here's the other house. This is on Rossmoyne, 1117 Rossmoyne. This was a great example of Spanish house in the neighborhood, but you didn't like this paneled metal door with the little lights at the top. So we haven't written the Mills Out contract yet, but that's going to be part of the contract, that this garage door be replaced with something more appropriate. So what is more appropriate? Here are two historic examples we've seen today. And in both of these cases, I think what strikes me is that older garage doors tend to be relatively simple. Most of the garage doors we see today tend to be a little showier. But in both of these cases, these are, real wood doors. Most of these are either overhead doors or roll-up doors. And I think if these weren't stained and, were on an appropriate house, especially these on the upper left, if that was a painted finish, they're not that far off from the house we just looked at today on Rossmoyne. There's a wide variety of doors out there. A lot of them try to be very country looking or very horsey looking. So what I've done is pull examples that run on both sides of that. I thought this one on the lower left was interesting. You have something that's very simple on those two left doors, almost like the house on Rosemount, with just kind of vertical boards. And then you have something here that's looking more like, stable or barn doors that I think might not be appropriate for a lot of our installations in Glendale. The door here, even though it's shown, most of these examples were on kind of modern period retro McMansion type houses, but a lot of these doors might work in some of our installations. This lower door again has just simple, almost board and batten kind of detailing. These were examples that were shown on more modern properties, but their simplicity might lend itself to kind of historic application, especially if they had a painted instead of a stain finish. And then there are some metal doors, and I know this example at the upper right is pretty close to the one that wasn't approvable over on Rossmoyne. But something like this, where we start getting a better quality metal door. The good thing about the metal doors, as opposed to the more plasticky vinyl coated or clad ones, is that it could be painted. So you could buy the door and then paint it to match appropriate trim colors. This is a possibility. What I was hoping to show is that there's a range of things out there, so that if someone said, I really don't want to put a wood door on for whatever reason, that we might have some alternatives to that we could recommend to them. And then I wanted to show these just as and I'm interested to hear what you think about this, because a lot of people, when they think historic garage doors, think something like this, almost trying to replicate like a carriage house instead of a car garage with these fake hinges put on, even though the doors are opening up. I can't think of many historic properties that I've seen in Glendale where this would be appropriate, except possibly some of our very earliest houses, a Victorian maybe, or
maybe that winery of ours.
Yeah.
maybe the winery. Well, that has big old wood doors, so. But so I just wanted to end with this to show that we may be encountering applicants coming in thinking they're doing the right thing by proposing something like this, and this is the sort of thing, with your direction, that I think we could guide them away from, if you agree. And that was everything I had for the doors. What I found is a lot of garage door websites have very careful security on their images, so I couldn't steal them as easily.
Yeah.
Could you steal designer doors? I think they had the heavy security ones.
Yeah,
One would hope the security on the doors themselves is equally good. As good.
that's right.
One hopes.
Want our applicants to be safe.
Actually, you can, come up with a solution because most of these are roll-up, unlike the ones that on Edmonton, it's sliding. The other one, you can make it more conventional to today's need.
Yeah, what I found with sliding doors like this is usually that kind of operation is the important thing, and no one really wants it anymore. But you can come really close to duplicating the look with an overhead or maybe a roll-up. So.
There's a lot of, you're right, there's a lot of websites and there's a lot of simpler roll-up doors which are wood or even look like wood. They're steel sectional doors.
For Madam Chairman,
Yes, please, Mr.
for me,
Mayor.
basically, whether it is wood or metal, I would prefer to have simple doors to disappear rather than attract attention to them, whatever we do. But then again, this is similar to the chimneys. We have to judge it case-by-case basis, what will go with what kind of architecture and what kind of setting and whatnot. But the simpler they are, the better they are, in my opinion.
I think my major concern is people just put white doors willy-nilly on a building. They don't care whether it blends in or not. And when you make some effort to make it part of the architecture, I think usually it's successful.
I thought on Rosemount, a simple coat of paint that you recommended
Exactly.
changed everything. So
Did you tell the council that we recommended that?
yes, I did.
We need to have some good.
Yeah, we
We can't let it go like that.
need a few little hugs over here.
Always make sure they know where
I happened to catch that meeting. I think the question came up why we were doing this. If I recall. And the answer was because
They have to
we
know
have a
that
little
you're
higher bar for the
the little details
detail
that
for the
make
visit.
And I
Visited
think that
homes.
the picture before and after speaks volume of that decision.
We'll use it as an example with future applicants.
Well, one question following up, Mr. Amir, is so if we're going to take it case by case on these doors, at what point we see what doors they're putting? Are we going to treat it like Edmonton windows? You know how we did it
I
on
defer to you.
Well, for designation cases, that's pretty much your call. If once we start developing some precedent as applicants come in, I can tell them ahead of time, like, this may be an issue for the commission. They look carefully at these things. Is that something you can do if you want to proceed with this, just to prepare them without telling them what your decision will be? But for historic district properties, our goal is to kind of do things as much at staff level as possible. So if new garage door proposals meet the guidelines, and I think I have direction from you guys in terms of keeping things simple, making sure the color palette works with the rest of the house, being open to metal and possibly other materials if the ultimate result is going to look okay, that would kind of be the guidance we'd get. And then as we build precedent by just doing this more often over the years, we'll have kind of a good backlog to kind of tell people this is what the commission can approve in general, and this is going to be a little trickier. So,
All right.
okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
I don't have any comments.
All right.
Okay.
I have no
With the
comment. I
garage
think
doors,
the-
we'll try to keep things as simple as possible. With the chimney pots, I think it's going to be a little more complicated because, we have a lot of variety and a lot of code issues that we have to meet also. So,
Okay.
One of the things that Arturo Toscanini would consist and would repeat to his orchestra was "Semplice va bene." Simple is better.
okay.
Well, and that's a lovely note to move on to our next agenda item.
Oh.
We have comments from commissioners, and if they're simple, the better.
I have some simple updates before we get to you guys.
All right.
Just to report back, last Tuesday, council heard 4 preservation-related items, so you'll be happy to hear that they approved the historic district signs that you had recommended.
All right, good.
So I'm going to be working with the sign team from Public Works. We're going to order the signs hopefully this week, and I'm not sure how quickly they'll be fabricated, and then we'll have those installed as soon as we can. So those are going to be gateway signs at each of the 3 historic districts. And then council also approved this moving forward. So as we get new historic districts, we'll be ready, and the budget will be available to put up new signs for the new districts.
So they don't have to go, you don't have to go to city council for
Yeah, we won't
everything?
have to go back again. We'll use the same design. We'll just obviously change the name of the district and the designation date, so you won't, we'll mention it to you, but you don't need to approve it, so.
Okay.
So that was pretty exciting. And then they also heard the 3 recent designations that you had recommended for that eclectic style house at 1535 Pacific, the Tudor house I mentioned before on Art Even, and what's the other one? Oh, the McCall's house, the French Revival house on Royal Boulevard. So those were all approved unanimously, and there was a lot of lively discussion, so they were interested in looking at them, so that was kind of...
If I may interject here, actually, the council seems to enjoy seeing the nominations. They're relatively routine items. There's no discussion. Usually nobody's coming to protest or speak against those items like they are in many of the other things the council hears. But the council really seems to enjoy hearing about the city's history and learning about different styles of architecture, and so we enjoy that.
Good, very good.
And then finally, based on our informal discussion earlier, I will make a point of creating kind of an introductory script for the beginning of our meetings, and then make sure that the council's motions for each of the items that you're hearing are easily found and readable.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Comment.
Mr. Martin?
I read in the paper or on your website that we're revisiting the window issue.
Yes, we have a tentative date. Can we?
Is that something we need to
I
be
believe
concerned-
we're targeting July 14th as a date to take a discussion regarding window replacements to the city council at the council's request. That's in regards to window replacements throughout the city, not specific to historic properties at all, but part of our design review process, in addition to looking at chimney replacements, and we also look at window replacements. And that actually generates a great deal of discussion in many different ways, in all directions.
Such a polite word.
So the council has requested an update on that, and we're preparing that report for mid-July.
Vinyl has become the key word. All right.
Yeah, but specifically districts in Glendale Register properties, the design review authority is clearly on your side, so that
Okay.
won't affect how you look at
Well, it's
things.
funny because many of the windows that people are replacing have had a 50-year lifespan, and none of the windows that are offered now offer that as a warranty. I mean, if you look at it comparatively speaking, what the life cycle of some of the older windows have been and are, it far exceeds anything that's out there right now, and probably would be able to continue. Just thought that was an interesting piece of information to throw out there.
And also the point is well taken, but the newer, most of these older windows are single glaze.
That's true.
I mean, so the efficiency factor is there.
In other parts of the country, they put storm windows on that make them more efficient without changing too much. So, I mean, there are other options that we just, new is not necessarily better. It's just, it keeps the economy going. So, one last comment from this commissioner. We have, the summer is upon us officially, I believe. The solstice was yesterday. So I was wondering if we wanted to make sure that our commissioners were going to be here for the meetings during the summer, or if we wanted to address if there was going to be a...
That's a great idea.
Can we do that?
We can do that. The next hearing is July 27th. I don't have the August date in front of me, if someone could help us with that.
24.
24?
August.
Okay, so July 27th and August 24. I'll be here.
I just took my vacation, so I don't know.
Okay. You just came back from Italy unless you're
Right.
I just came back,
taking a
You came back
cruise
from Nice.
on us.
but I am leaving on October again for South America. So
Oh, well, and I'm not leaving. I think that I'm fine too.
I am fine too.
Yeah.
All right, well then
Don't have
that,
any-
Okay.
I just thought we would maybe want to look at it.
That changes, let me know.
All right. And unless there are other comments
No
from
comments.
staff or the commissioners,
None here.
shall we move adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Thank
I
you, sir.
second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.